So you've made some music and you're about to put it out, but you don't know if you like your band name, if you like your artist name, or maybe you just don't have one at all. So, how do you go about making a name for yourself? Well, believe it or not, this is kind of the hardest part. Yeah, it's easy to feel inspired to make music and to create it, but when you're ready to say, hey guys, this is me and this is my name, it's not always as easy. Dave Grohl has even famously said the hardest part of being in the Foo Fighters was making up the name, the Foo Fighters. So let's dive in and let's talk about ways you can create your own band name and if you can determine if it's going to be a successful name before you launch it. But before we do, don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe. So, what makes a good band name? That is a complicated answer because there's a ton of factors on what we would consider a good band name. For example, Foo Fighters. People may have thought that band name sounded kind of silly, but until they realized maybe Dave Grohl was behind it, that there's some genius behind it. So I think that just right off the bat is a quick example of it doesn't really matter what other people think about it. It's just mostly if you like that band name. Now there are going to be some band names that you're like, maybe that shouldn't be a band name at all. And that is a factor because the majority of the population will think that band name is weird or maybe inappropriate. So keep those things in mind as you're going about and making your band name. But something to take into consideration is the genre of music that you're going to be making. For example, I make lo-fi music. I doubt anyone would want to listen to a lo-fi musician whose name is Death Diet. But if that was a heavy metal band or a rock band, they might think, oh, that's really cool. Let's check them out. So when you're picking out your band name, make sure you're paying attention to what your genre is. Is it going to appeal to people in your genre? You can try and come out of left field and say, I'm going to pick something that isn't going to be defined by my genre or doesn't hint at what my genre of music is and see how that goes. Sometimes people do have some breakout success with that. Or if you make a name that's just kind of so neutral that it doesn't really apply to a specific genre, that also could be a good way to remain ambiguous about things. A band name that I think does that pretty well is Owl City. If you've never heard Owl City's music, but you just rely on some visuals for the name, you can go either way. It could be dark, it could be at night, it could be like creepy noir music, it could be maybe some heavy metal music depending on the design of some owls, or you can have a whole bunch of cities and a whole bunch of bright lights with like a couple of owls here and there, and maybe that's more of a pop feel, or maybe it's more of electronic feel, Depending on how you craft your image along with your name, it can direct what genre people will think you're in. So if you make a genre neutral band name, make sure your imagery goes along to push what genre you're in so people realize, oh, Owl City, dark at night, very noir, very heavy metal kind of vibes coming from it. And as you're making your band name, there's a couple techniques you can use to make it more interesting or spark some inspiration. For example, you can open up the dictionary and just flip through it and pick out a couple of words and see how those are going to work together, or pick a color and just cycle through a couple of words that you think is going to work well with it. You can also look up a random band name generator online. This is what Childish Gambino did, but his was for the Wu-Tang Clan members. He just typed in Donald Glover and it spat out Childish Gambino. But there are other generators besides that. For example, you could use ChatGPT or another AI, or you can focus on mixing up or mashing up a couple of different words and see how that works together. Blink 182 is a little bit different because they were just Blink, but there was another band named Blink in Europe, and so they had to add the 182. But that's also a good tip too. Come up with a word, throw a number behind it, see what happens. For example, Sum 41, you might think, oh, that's just a word with a number behind it, but there's a deeper meaning. Sum 41 created their band name because 41 days is how long it took them to come up with the band, since some 41. So there's a whole bunch of different techniques you can do, but there's a few things I would avoid doing when you're trying to make your band name. For example, the spelling. Sometimes creating a weird or unique spelling for a band name makes you stand out, but if you're not that popular or you don't have a large following, it can be difficult for people to find you online. So if you're going to spell your band name a little bit differently, maybe with a couple extra L's or O's, or remove all the vowels, it might make it a little bit harder for people to find you, especially when they say your name. For example, if your name is Family Band, but you take all the vowels out, it will look kind of weird and people won't know how to find you per se. So you're gonna need to take that into consideration. You also want to take into consideration, if you Google the band or artist name, are they going to show up? Is something else going to show up? If you're naming yourself after an event or something that's happened that's really big in pop culture, those events are going to show up first, and you're not going to show up hardly at all. And before the days of the internet, that was probably okay to name yourself, the Manhattan Project or something that was really big, so that, people couldn't find you. But now that the internet is so accessible with all the information in the entire world, you've got to make sure you stand out. So I wouldn't name yourself after a historical event or something that's happened in pop culture, because you're just going to get buried in search results. You can maybe do a combination of mashup and see what happens from there. Like, just off the top of my head, maybe Civil Twilight. That might be a cool, interesting take. Who knows? And you're also going to want to make sure that the band name you're looking for isn't already somehow copyrighted. For example, if you're inspired by a movie and you want to have an aspect of that movie be in your band name, you might need to see if that's copyrighted. Now, that might seem like kind of a stretch, but you can't necessarily have your band name also be the title of a movie and copyright it. Might run into some conflict with that, so be wary about band names that might get you into trouble when it comes to copyright. Now, it's really easy to think maybe that's a bad name or maybe that's a good name for a band. If the band's already popular or it's already formed, like, that band's already made it. If you already know that band's name, they're successful, I would say, in their band name. The bands that you don't know their name, or you come across them, it just doesn't stick in your head, you're like, probably they don't have a good band name, or maybe their music just doesn't stick with you. Either way, it's fine, because it's not your name. You want to make sure that your name is going to be memorable and people are going to want to come back and check out your music. And if your name just isn't too memorable, then you also just want to make sure your music is top tier. So as soon as they hear it, they say, oh, I want to come back and I want to listen to that song or that artist. Who are they? So as long as your music's good, your band name is really not going to matter. And for me, when I was coming up with my artist name, I had no idea how I was really going to do it. I had a list of like 10 different band names, and I kept going through a couple of them, and I was like, it's either too long or it sounds kind of weird, or I don't know. I feel like it's really making me only able to work in a certain genre. So I did not have a band name while I was writing music for maybe close to 6 months or so. And I was getting feedback from friends, running them past people, and everyone kind of was like, none of these names really sound good, or they don't really fit you that well, or I don't know how you're going to come up with imagery to fit what you're trying to do when it comes to music. So I actually just kind of took my band name from a song. So there's a song called Blue Lights by Jorah Smith. And in that song, there's a siren that happens. And she says blue lights, and then a siren, you can hear it coming in the background. And she's talking about a cop car in this situation, but I was like, oh, I like that siren sound. And she's saying blue lights. Blue is probably my favorite color. Maybe green is now. But let's just be Blue Sirens. Let's see how that sounds. And I felt like this was a good name to where it could have been electronic, it could have been pop, and now it's lo-fi. So there's not really any rules, I would say, to you have to do X, Y, and Z. There's not a formula that's for it, but you ultimately have to like your band name. And you can change your band name as many times as you really want. But once you have one that's popular and people know you by that band name, you kind of want to stick to it. For example, Paramore. When some of the members of Paramore left, everyone that was left wasn't going to change their name. They were still going to be Paramore. Or U2. U2 was changing their name like every other show until they landed on U2. Right before they were U2, they were Golden Feedback. So you can change your name until you find one that works well for you. But once there's a name that people know you by and they're going to tell people this is X and Y Z band, make sure that you don't change your name after that. Because you change your name again, people aren't going to be able to find you. They're going to be looking for you under your old name. So if you do make a name change, make a really big deal about it so that people know they can't find you underneath that name, but they can find you under this name. So what makes a good band name and what makes a bad band name? Like I said, it really just comes down to if people remember you, and then they're probably going to remember you more so from your music. But I would say a good band name is something that's not too long. If it is long, it's pretty memorable. For example, Catfish and the Bottlemen, that's kind of a long band name. And I only remember that band name because of their album artwork. Red Hot Chili Peppers, also kind of a long band name, but they kind of shorten it with the abbreviation. They have an iconic logo. They also are just a hugely famous, popular band before I was kind of around in music, so they kind of get away with it. But in modern day, super long band names I don't really think work too well. You can probably blame this on social media because of how long your handle has to be and your website as well. So the only thing I would really say is stay away from things that are really long for band names. Let your song titles, let your albums be super long, but your band name, keep it, relatively short. Look at Fall Out Boy. All their albums and all their song titles are super long, but their name, Fall Out Boy, pretty short. Also, don't be afraid if you're a solo artist to pick a name that sounds like you're a band. Owl City, one guy. Blue Sirens, just me. But either one of them could potentially be leaned into as a name for a full band. Also, any band name that has the in the beginning of it, maybe limit that, but if you're going to keep it, own it. For example, Death Cab for Cutie. People always go back and forth is it the Death Cab for Cutie or is it just Death Cab for Cutie? I remember when people were downloading those songs from the internet and no one really knew if it was supposed to be the or there's not a the. So if you're mostly going to be like a noun, maybe don't have the in front of it. Because if you don't put the in front of it, then I think it's easier for people to find you and to identify with you. For example, I don't think a lot of people are going around saying the Arctic Monkeys unless they're introducing them. Or the Strokes. They're just saying Strokes. It kind of sounds weird to say just Strokes. Is it just Strokes or is it the Strokes? Either way, they should just be one single word. They don't need to be the in front of it, like Arctic Monkeys. We don't need the Strokes. We don't need the. It's only there for proper English when we're like trying to introduce the band. So try to avoid the thes when you're making a band name because it kind of takes away and you're trying to make your band sound maybe a little more epic than they actually are. Don't have the. Just go straight into Strokes or Arctic Monkeys and then let other people say the. Kind of like Facebook, drop the, just call it Facebook, not the Facebook. And lastly, once you think you have a band name that you really like, test it out. If you're playing a couple shows here and there, but the band name isn't completely solidified, if you're still beta testing some things, try it out some shows, see how it goes. Ask your friends for feedback. Make a couple of posters or imagery to see how you like it. And when you do this, you're going to get excited because it's the start of a brand new chapter for you as an artist. And I've been there. I've bought into a terrible band name in the past, like the Fluorescent Lines. I don't even know how to spell fluorescent anymore, and I don't know anyone that does off the top of their head. But I was super excited about that band name. And I honestly should have just slept on it for a little bit and realized this is not a good band name. Sleep on it for a little bit and decide maybe after a couple days if you like the band name enough, if you're willing to commit to it, and if the feedback that you've been receiving lines up with what you'd like that band name to do for you and for your overall vision. Take your time. No one's in a rush to name their band. The music is still going to be there. It's still going to need work. There's always more music to make. And then you can release it under a dope band name where people say, wow, both the band name and that music is great. I remember them both. And I can't wait to tell people about both the band and the music they make. But what do you guys think? Do you think these are helpful tips to creating your own band name? Do you have ways that you'd go about making your band names that you'd like to share with others? If so, drop those and your thoughts in the comments below, and don't forget to like and subscribe. And until next time, peace.